As you can see, the sky is once again very flat and grey today. It's almost like it's February in London, and whenever I come out to photograph, I always want harsh shadows and light and contrast and stuff like that. But the reality is it's not always like that. And a lot of people will choose just not to go out and shoot in this sort of weather. I think that's not the right thing to do. I don't think people should become fair weather photographers and only go out when it's sunny, because you get a whole different element when you're out in this sort of weather. And that's what this video is all about. We're going to be talking about different techniques that I use during flat lighting conditions to get more interesting photos. Now, it's going to be based around a couple of overarching topics, but for the most part, it's going to be related to contrast and still being able to get contrast in your images even when the sky is flat and you haven't got any shadow to play with. So in this video, going to be tons of techniques, but if you have any more, let me know down below in the comments. Enjoy it. We're going to get some photos along the way as well, and hopefully put my techniques into real world practice. So enjoy. So the first thing I'd really talk about here is overexposing your skies, making it a bit of negative space. When it's grey like this, you want some negative space to frame a subject, and then that creates your contrast. So I've done this spot before and it works out pretty well. You frame Tower Bridge with the archway, and you've also got this little bit of negative space just off there. You capture someone in that bit of negative space when you're overexposing your sky, and it creates a lovely little silhouette. It can work when it's sunny, it can work when it's grey. Speaking of grey, look who it is. Overexposing your sky also works when you're playing with perspective and looking up at things. So bridges work great for this, hence why I'm at Tower Hill for this example, to show you Tower Bridge. As you can see, when people look over the edge, you can see their heads pop up, and that creates a nice little bit of contrast. You've got the white of the sky, the dark of the silhouette, and because you're overexposing your sky, it is just pure negative space. Now, if you can't do that by bumping your exposure in camera, you can always do this in Lightroom as well. I don't think the 28 is going to do this image any justice, but as you can see with the tower, again, you've got another archway and a nice bit of negative space underneath the archway with the overexposure of the sky, framing a little subject in between one of these columns here. Yeah, work pretty nicely, but I think you're probably going to need like a 70, 90 even to get that properly. And also, how can I resist some pigeons? Look at that little brown one in amongst all the darker coloured ones. That's quite a nice bit of contrast again there. Animals. Doesn't have to always be people with street photography, does it? Another thing when it comes to creating contrast by overexposure is it doesn't need to be the sky. It can be the water. Get a nice bit of glassy reflection from it. And we're on a bit of the Thames, which is usually filled with water because the tide's out. So it looks a bit like that at the minute, which means capturing someone as they're walking along the water, because people are, you can silhouette them with the water and get a nice bit of contrast there as well. But also, it's not just about contrast, it's about looking for things that you wouldn't normally see. Like, you know, this area of land that isn't usually land and not walkable is walkable at the minute. So you can really get some interesting shots that you wouldn't otherwise get. Not so much worrying about the grey skies, but you're worrying about, you know, getting a different perspective on it. So looking up at Tower Bridge, for example, rather than just walking across it, can give you an interesting perspective on things. Another thing that I'd highly recommend doing is, even though it hasn't been raining, there's always going to be some form of reflection about, whether that be form of reflection on glass, or tiny little puddles that have just been left and that are there and can't drain away. And that will give you a bit of extra reflection, a bit of extra dimension to your images. For example, always try for the split reflection on glass like this, or you see a tiny bit of puddle around, shoot into the puddle, try and get a reflection that way. There's so many different techniques you can use, leading lines, you know, reflection, contrast like we've been talking about, and all of that will make your image, and it doesn't need to be sunny conditions to get that to happen. Look at Gray, by the way. He's basically a pro now, look at him. He's got his own pocket, he's got his Sony, he's making videos. You should check him out, I'll leave a link in the description. It's quite good. His first video came out recently and very, very good. Another thing that you should always make use of is the contrast between being inside to shooting outside. No matter how grey and how dark it is, as long as it's daytime, you will have that light-dark contrast. So alleyways that shoot into open spaces like I'm in now will create a hell of a lot of contrast. You'll be able to get your silhouettes, you'll be able to get your shapes, and it won't have to be sunny and full of shadow and like cutting in lines and all stuff like that, because the dark from being inside to shooting out will create that contrast for you. Also, not so much a tip for actually getting good shots, but definitely use it as an opportunity to scout out new areas. I'm always shooting that side of Tower Bridge, but I'm on sort of Butler's Wharf side and the other side now, sort of heading east. And I never come down this far really, and you'll be able to scout out different locations and think to yourself, oh, that would be good when it's like this, or that would be good at this time of day. Take some shots, and then if you do get the opportunity to come back, even better, right? And also, when I come to talk about different techniques you can use, focusing on texture and shooting through it will always give you something as well. Take this, for example, as a frame. You've got the window that's sort of all textured with this weird paper because it's been smashed. Shooting into it from the other side of the glass, you can see the people walking through it. Shooting them creates nice silhouettes, creates a bit of interest because you've got the texture as the foreground element. Yeah, it's pretty good. I actually think I got my shot of the day at the scoop here, just other side of Tower Bridge, and it was a complete fluke, to be honest. I was walking down there and trying to capture a photo as I was walking down, and there was a seagull just sitting up here. Went to take the photo, and as soon as I took the photo, the seagull flew. But it ended up framing those buildings up there, basically there, perfectly. And yeah, it looks really, really good. I'm happy with that. You can see its face, its wings are in the right position. Yeah, complete potluck, but that's another thing, isn't it? You don't need to photograph people with street photography. There's so many different options, and that's one of the things, isn't it? You can do so much with it. It's so vague that you can do so much with it, and that shot turned out better because I overexposed the sky. So going back to a previous point of overexposing the sky, even better. Let's also talk about having a pop of colour in your images. So, for example, that lady in red there is surrounded by monochromatic colours and shapes, and especially in wintertime, as you look around, there is people wearing dark clothing everywhere. So finding someone that is wearing lighter colour clothing or a pop of colour in amongst the darkness is unique, and it's a different perspective. So naturally, you're going to want to capture that with, you know, different things around it. So if you've got people in dark clothing everywhere and you've got one person in red as a prime example, that will create a natural bit of colour contrast, and a really good thing to photograph when it's grey and gloomy. Or you could do the complete opposite, and as you've probably noticed in this video, quite a lot of pictures are shooting monochrome. Take the colour element out of it completely, and then you're just relying on your images telling a story or having good techniques and a compositionally well-made image. So there's two options. I like the choice of shooting in colour and black and white, but there's good options. Black and white takes the element of worrying about the grey and gloominess out of it because there's no colour. There's just a nice compositionally focused image and techniques are used well, and that is what's going to make your images stronger when you're shooting in black and white. Across the Street's another scene that I feel like captures the essence of, well, the season really. It was Valentine's Day yesterday. Capturing a couple walking across this scene with a love heart by them would be quite nice, and yeah, quite unique, I think. That's another thing, when it's grey, you don't need the sky involved, just a little bit of texture, a little bit of a thing to draw your eye, and you can get a good photo. How could I not come to One New Change when it's grey and dull out? It's one of the best places to shoot when it is grey and dull because there's so many different geometric shapes you can get and you don't need sunlight for it. You're shooting from inside to outside and therefore makes quite a nice natural contrast in your images. Just before that though, we are in this little courtyard that basically overlooks St. Paul's, and a nice little fountain pond thing gives you a nice reflection of St. Paul's. So if you're at One New Change, you might as well come here as well, right? So inside of One New Change, you can get so many different geometric angles, and that's one of the main reasons I come here. For example, the bottom of the staircase that I always shoot, looking up, get a nice silhouette in the corner there as the people walk up the stairs. Nice little shot. You've got the staircase from the second floor looking down, which I always shoot, so I probably won't go there today. And then you've got along the underpass bit leading to St. Paul's, which is just over there. You've got the floor that you can see people walking in, which is quite a nice place to shoot as well. So this would be it. Someone walking across there, you'll see their feet, and you'd get images that look somewhat like this that have been taken in the past. And yeah, quite an interesting perspective on it. And like I say, you don't need a lot of light to be able to do it because you're inside basically shooting on a frosted glass floor, so you're shooting to the outside. There you go. Here's a perfect example of said thing. The feet on the ceiling creates an interesting perspective. But I've mentioned this in previous videos before. It's a great place to shoot. So we're back at it. We had a coffee and just a nice sit for a bit. But it's now started to spit, like very light rain. So it's not really affecting the image drastically, but it does mean the floor gets a little bit wet. And that means a bit more reflection. That's one thing as well. When you get grey skies and stuff like that, you can always hope for rain. Hoping for rain, do a little rain dance. That might help you get better photos in of itself, because you can get reflections, you can get people with their umbrellas, bit of a dynamic feel to it, and then puddles start to form and you've got all that sort of stuff. And then when it starts to get nighttime, even more of a perk, because you can have the artificial light of the shop windows and stuff like that combined with the floor can create something really, really cool. That's pretty much it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I certainly have. I've got a few good images, I reckon, and it's been fun. join me next week where I talk about various different things related to photography, I suppose. See you next week. Bye-bye.